I'm going to rank my CFA level 1 scores from hardest to easiest based on my CFA level 1 scores that you see behind me. Number 1, financial statement analysis. So if you take a look at my score, I actually performed pretty decently on the day of the exam. I could have performed way worse, but the majority of my ability was below the 70% level that the CFA listed, so that's why I ranked this one the hardest. Number 2 is a tie. Number 2 is derivatives and portfolio management. Now, number 2 is a tie because the weighting was the same. My ability seems to have been the same on that day, and my score was literally the same, with my performance being in the middle of my ability that day. Now, derivatives didn't shock me too much here because it is a beast when you factor in how much detail it entails. Portfolio management did shock me a bit, but it was mainly because it wasn't that tough, but it did pack in a wide variety of information. I'd say that the commonality here is that the breadth of information within these two sections is likely what gave me issue. And if you follow the logic, that's one of the reasons why I ranked FSA as the hardest out of all of them, because the breadth of information was so large that it's just a lot to maintain in your head on the day of the exam. Number 3, quantitative methods and economics. Yes, I had another tie, same weighting, same ability, and same score and similar performance being within the middle of my ability that day. Because these two sections have a higher weighting on the exam, I did my best to study these two sections the most relative to sections like derivatives and portfolio management. Start out with topics that you think are tough or hard to remember and study them first so you can return to them more regularly throughout your study period, just like I did from August to April. Number 4, alternative investments. Shout out to Ethereum. Actually, not really. I'm not a big cryptocurrency guy. I just went to the Seattle NFT Museum one day and had to pick up this mug. I thought it looked pretty cool. Now, if you take a look at my score for alts, my performance that day is pretty identical to that of ethics and fixed income. I ranked this one harder because the variance of my ability seemed to be wider and crossed below the 70% line in the worst case scenario. This doesn't surprise me too much for the same reason why I think I did poorly on the other sections before. And as we all know, alternative investments is chock full of information. For example, when it came to things like private equity, hedge funds, waterfalls, blah, 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 it was just stuff that was just so hard to retain because they just threw one term at you, one after another. It was just hard to keep in your head. So I ranked this one pretty high because there's just a lot of information. Number 5, ethics. Now, I thought ethics was pretty tough, mainly for the sheer fact that I was not going to memorize all of the code of ethics and all of these standards. Most of the overall exam material was new to me, so memorizing an additional set of the code of ethics, standards, it was just not realistic for me. So this one was really hard fought as far as a battle to have been won. But I did win this one, I feel like. I think I did pretty well, considering the fact that I could have done way worse on this section. Number 6, fixed income. Now, fixed income is just one of those topics that I felt like was almost akin to learning a new language. It's not terribly difficult, but it's one of those things that just makes you kind of pause and think a little bit before having to regurgitate or spit out your answer. So it's like when you're learning Spanish and you have to conjugate a verb and it's different than how it is in English. You hear someone speak to you, you translate it in your head to English, and then you try to translate it back into Spanish so you can then speak it back to the person. It takes you longer to kind of have a conversation with someone. That's how it feels like when I'm going through a fixed income problem where, if you're talking specifically about rates, I have to start thinking, well, oh wait, I have to think opposite when it comes to the price of the bond or the note. Number 7, equity investments. Now, equity was pretty easy for me. It wasn't mathematically difficult or anything like that. But going back to what I said earlier in the video, I bet it would have felt even easier for me had I had the experience in things like financial modeling that I'm now getting experience in doing extracurricular courses outside of the CFA. All right, number 8, last but not least, corporate issuers. Now, honestly, I was surprised by scoring as high as I did on this section because I actually found it pretty hard. But what I think, looking back on when I studied for this section of the exam, what I think was the differentiator here was the fact that, again, as I mentioned before early on, I studied this section, or I first started learning this section early on, between November and December, roughly about 5 to 6 months before sitting for the exam. So I had time to review it, and maybe I thought it was going to be a little bit more difficult because it did take me a while to retain information like, operational leverage, financial leverage, things like that. And, perhaps maybe the questions that I got on the exam on exam day were easier than questions that I had prepped prior to exam day. So it could be that as well. But I don't know. I wasn't expecting to score that well on exam day. So on that particular section. So that was actually a pleasant surprise. All right. So conclusion, the main takeaway here is that you need to start your hardest section sooner and constantly review them even while you're learning new sections. I know that's going to be difficult, but you need to do that in order for you to have better recall and better understanding of some of those topics that are just really, really, really hard to just wrap your head around. And honestly, I think the best way to gauge your progress while you're doing this is to use practice questions and review videos from a prep provider. If you want to see which prep provider helped me pass level 1, check out this video right here.